All right, so here what I want to show you is doing paper mache over a small wooden object called a spindle. And again, you'll see I covered it in Vaseline and now I'm adding the saran wrap all over that. Now what happened here with this object, and you'll see it in a minute, is that I had a lot of problems with it, a lot of failures, and I ended up having to completely put it back together. And I think one of the problems you're seeing, I'm doing the paper mache here with ripped up brown paper bag, and I did about 3 layers with the wallpaper paste. And the wallpaper paste is actually really, really strong. And I think that the 3 layers was too much in this case. Plus, it's just an awkward form. So I'll show you when I start cutting it what I mean by that. But with a lot of objects where you're doing paper mache on top of it, inevitably what's going to happen is that you will have to cut it off in several parts. So here you see I'm cutting it. Now it's a wooden object underneath. So really the X-Acto blade, the box cutter, was ideal. And it did score into the wood just a tiny bit, which didn't bother me all that much. You can't really tell in the long run. I was able to just wash it off with, like washing dishes, and it was fine. But I really had to pry this stuff over, and I think I just didn't do a really good job at cutting it. But you notice the butter knife there is part of having to pry it off. So once I scored it and it was open, I actually used those tools to kind of push it underneath the paper. And it wasn't necessarily glued to it, but it was just so thick that it was really stuck on there. So it is possible to put these forms back together if you have hot glue. And you notice I did use a stapler to kind of put a couple staples in where it was ripped, but the hot glue in this case is kind of ideal. The problem with the hot glue is you do have to be careful to sort of wipe down either with a little tool or when the hot glue cools off a little bit with your finger, or else you get those kind of like big bubbles of hot glue. And then when you go to paper mache over that seam, it changes the shape a little bit on there. And you can see that as I'm starting to paper mache back over this one, I didn't really get rid of all those hot glue bumps on the seam when I put it back together, especially in that tall, thin top part. And so you can see it kind of changed the contour line of the form a little bit. But you know, it worked pretty well, and I'm happy with the other form, and I don't think that other people will notice it quite as much as I do, which is usually the case. I've noticed that happens so much with us in class, is that we see all the tiny little faults in there and no one else really sees it. So I'm just keeping it and going with it.